going on, guys? My name is Austin. This is the Bodies in Business podcast. And today we're going to talk about how you can stay motivated this year and what you can do on a day-to-day basis to increase your dopamine levels, because that is tied directly to your motivation, right? The reason why I wanted to talk about motivation and dopamine is because I was giving a presentation recently and I got a question after the whole presentation, and the person said, how can I stay motivated? And it's a really simple question, but then there's so many things that go into the inner workings of how we stay motivated and the day-to-day actions that we can take. So today's video, we're going to talk about what is dopamine, how we can increase our baseline levels of dopamine on everyday and doing everyday habits, what foods and actions increase dopamine and by how much do they increase our dopamine. We're also going to talk about a discussion that Lembke had with Andrew Huberman in a podcast back in 2021 and the good little nuggets that we took out from that. And then I'm going to talk about some great videos that you can go learn more about what dopamine is and how to increase your motivation. Okay? So what is dopamine? On a basic level, dopamine is responsible for movement and motivation and drive. There's a fundamental relationship between dopamine released in your brain and your desire to exert effort, and you can control this dopamine release. Dopamine is a molecule in our brain and body that when released tends to make you look outside yourself, pursue things outside yourself, and to crave things outside yourself. If you're ever feeling lethargic with low motivation and drive, that's a low dopamine state. If you're ever feeling really excited, motivated, like you're doing a public speaking event or you're going skydiving, you are in a high dopamine state. Dopamine is the universal currency for moving us forward towards our goals. Dopamine is the way that you can track pleasure. It's the way you can track success. It's the way you track whether or not you're doing well or doing poorly. If your dopamine is low, you will not feel motivated. If it is high, you will feel very motivated. If it's somewhere in the middle, how you feel depends on if you had higher dopamine a few minutes ago or lower dopamine a few minutes ago. So that was a brief monologue on what dopamine is and how it can affect us. But essentially, dopamine is a molecule in our brain and body that can really make us feel super motivated. Or if we don't have enough dopamine in our body, we don't feel like we're super motivated at all. And so I want to talk about how we can increase our baseline levels of dopamine now that we've talked about what dopamine is and how it can motivate us. All right, so let's just jump right into that. So the 5 things that can really up our dopamine levels are 1, sleep; 2, this thing called NSDR or non-sleep deep rest. Our nutrition plays a major role in our dopamine baseline levels. Sunlight exposure and then movement and exercise also play a major part in our dopamine levels, okay? So we're going to talk about sleep first. So sleep is one of the most underrated regulators of dopamine in the body. Throughout the day, as we are awake, we use dopamine to stay focused, motivated, and alert. The brain actually downregulates dopamine receptors to maintain balance, okay? So throughout the day, you're doing things, you're staying motivated, and then your brain and your body are like, okay, we need to downregulate these motivation receptors, these dopamine receptors, because this person's going to work, 72 hours straight if we don't downregulate. All right. So dopamine also allows our circadian rhythm to naturally dip during the day and then being stored at night to support healthy sleep cycles. So when we get enough sleep, our dopamine receptors are fully recovered. All right. So we've all been there when we don't get enough sleep at night and we wake up and we just don't feel like doing anything. I've been there 2 weeks ago. I got crappy sleep 2 nights in a row and I literally woke up in a fog and I didn't want to do anything. And I think we've all had moments in our lives where our sleep was just very, very poor and you can just feel unmotivated. You feel like you don't have any energy. You feel like you don't want to do anything. And that is directly tied to dopamine. Your dopamine receptors are not fully recovering so that it doesn't allow you to want to push you to do more and be motivated. Dopamine may still be released, but there aren't enough receptors when we don't get enough sleep, okay? It's like shouting into an empty auditorium. The result is lower motivation, more impulsivity and risk-taking, and the noticeable drop in focus, mood, and cognitive performance. Sleep is huge, essentially. It's no doubt that sleep has incredible amounts of impacts on our motivation. So that's number 1, is make sure you're getting enough sleep, okay? And it is recommended to get around 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. And it's also recommended that the best time in research that shows from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. is one of the best times for your brain and body to recover. All right. So I know that's a lot of information about sleep, but sleep is so important. All right. So now we're going to just briefly talk about non-sleep deep rest. I'm not a expert on non-sleep deep rest. I think I kind of do this occasionally when I take my naps. I take around 15 to 20 minute naps, but I don't think it's specifically non-sleep deep rest. But you can go do a lot more research on non-sleep deep rest. And it's basically almost like a meditative state, but it's you're a little more in a sleepy state. All right. So I don't want to, get into that too much because I don't really do that often. I try to get enough sleep. And so they say that non-sleep deep rest can be helpful in upping your dopamine levels. All right, nutrition. Now, this is probably one of the biggest ones that I think people are really missing out on. So the sleep is something I know people are not getting enough of. And then the nutrition side, this is super important. So tyrosine. Tyrosine is an amino acid in your body used to make dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, so that it's great to have high amounts of tyrosine in your diet. Okay. So that doesn't mean you just go out and eat foods that have tyrosine in it and you're going to feel ultra motivated. Okay. Now on your way there, you're motivated to get the tyrosine, but this is just to understand that you have to have the building blocks in your body in order to make dopamine. And in order to make dopamine, you need tyrosine. So that's like a building block that you need in your body in order to make dopamine. So highest tyrosine foods per 100 grams. Parmesan cheese has 1,700 milligrams in 100 grams of Parmesan cheese. Soybeans, lean beef, turkey breast, chicken breast, tuna, salmon, and pork. All of these have high levels of dopamine, okay? Not dopamine. High levels of tyrosine that can make dopamine. Foods that have moderate levels of tyrosine are Greek yogurt, eggs, Swiss cheese, tofu, tempeh, lentils, and chickpeas. So I just gave you, I think it's around 16 or 17 foods that have high levels or moderate levels of tyrosine. Now, I'm always interested in how tyrosine is used I was interested in how tyrosine is converted to dopamine. So I want to walk you through that process because we're actually going to learn that you need more than just tyrosine in order to make dopamine. How the body turns tyrosine into dopamine. Dopamine is made through a short biochemical pathway that starts with the amino acid tyrosine, which comes from protein in your diet. Step 1, tyrosine enters the brain. After you eat protein-rich foods, tyrosine enters the bloodstream and crosses the blood-brain barrier. All right. This works best when insulin is low and protein intake is adequate. So that's interesting. Step 2, tyrosine is converted to L-DOPA. And that's a rate limiting step if you wanted to get technical with this. Inside dopamine producing neurons, tyrosine is converted into L-DOPA by an enzyme called tyrosine hydroxylase. This step is the bottleneck of dopamine production and requires iron, oxygen, vitamin B6, adequate sleep, and low stress. So all 4 of those things are needed in order for your body to produce more dopamine. That's kind of cool. If this step slows down, dopamine production drops. All right, so step 3. Now we've converted tyrosine to L-DOPA. Now L-DOPA is being converted to dopamine. So L-DOPA is quickly converted into dopamine by another enzyme called aromatic L-amino acid decarboxylase, or AADC, again requiring vitamin B. Once formed, dopamine is stored in vesicles, released when needed for motivation, focus, reward, and movement. All right, so those are the 3 steps that it takes to convert tyrosine into dopamine. And I think it's important to know that because I like to understand the mechanics behind, hey, I'm going to eat tyrosine, but I need to know how that tyrosine is converted to dopamine. So why your lifestyle matters more than just intaking tyrosine. When you get poor sleep, the receptors aren't ready to take in that dopamine. So you need to get good sleep so that your dopamine receptors are ready to take in more dopamine. Chronic stress is high. Dopamine gets depleted faster when you have chronic stress. Your micronutrients are low, so you need iron and B6. So we're going to talk about iron and B6 sources so you can have that. And then the last thing is inflammation is elevated. So it's not just about eating tyrosine, but I would say that's the first step, is to find foods that you enjoy that have a lot of tyrosine in them and make sure you're having that in your diet. Okay. You don't just want to eat those foods and be like, oh, like I said, this isn't just going to create a lot of motivation just by eating tyrosine, but that's part of the equation. Okay, so what foods contain a lot of B6? Usually animal-based foods have a lot of B6, okay? And that's chicken breast, turkey, salmon, tuna, beef, pork, and eggs. And there's some plant-based foods that have B6: chickpeas, lentils, bananas, potatoes, sunflower seeds, spinach, and avocados. And what foods have a lot of iron? Heme iron, best in the foods that have heme iron in it, which is best absorbed by your body, is red meat, beef liver, chicken thighs, turkey, sardines, and oysters. And then non-heme iron foods that are plant-based are lentils, chickpeas, soybeans, tofu, spinach, pumpkin seeds, and quinoa, and black beans. It says plant iron with vitamin C to improve absorption. And foods that have vitamin C are citrus, peppers, and berries. And that's just a few. But I always find it very important to understand, like, we have to have things in our body that are able to produce that dopamine so that we can have that great motivation and movement and drive. Okay. So it takes, some building blocks to get there. All right. So that's the first three things: sleep, NSDR, and then nutrition. And now the fourth thing is sunlight exposure, particularly in the morning. So according to Andrew Huberman's podcast, you need to get 5 to 10 minutes outside on a sunny day. 10 to 20 minutes are recommended on a cloudy day, and then 20 to 30 minutes outside on a very overcast day. Viewing morning sunlight increases cortisol early in the day. Cells in your eye send signals to your hypothalamus. It sets in motion a dopamine-related cascade of neuromodulators, including dopamine, and hormones that lead to states of well-being, elevated mood, alertness throughout the day. I love going for a morning walk almost every day because honestly, it gets me very motivated to want to do things. It gets blood and oxygen to my brain, and also just it kind of gets me ready for the day. That movement actually produces more dopamine and allows me to kind of get my dopamine levels a little higher before I go and do some work. All right, so sunlight exposure. And then the fifth thing is movement, exercise. And they say recommended 5 days a week of exercise of 150 minutes of light to moderate exercise, or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise is recommended by the American Heart Association. And movement in general is just going to up your baseline levels of dopamine. All right, so those are the 5 things that you should focus on if you want to feel more motivated. All right. Motivation isn't just going to happen unless you have like a brief insight that like maybe you're going to die if you don't change your habits, or you come to a turning point in your life, because we have these moments in our lives where something switches in our brain and says, hey, you need to do something about your either wellness, job, or family in order for yourself to be better off. And so that's the first motivational thought. But these things are what you can actually do on a day-to-day basis to continue to have that motivation. And I think that's super important, that motivation can tend to wear off if you're not doing these things. All right. You're not just going to continue to be motivated if you're sitting on the couch eating foods that don't have a lot of tyrosine or B6 or iron. You're not, super active. You're not getting outside and getting that sunlight. You're not getting great sleep. Those are the things that are going to prevent you from having high levels of motivation. Now, I thought it was pretty interesting to understand what types of foods and actions increase dopamine and by how much. All right, so now we know kind of the 5 things that you can do on a day-to-day basis. Now we're going to talk about a few things that increase dopamine at different levels. So chocolate increases your dopamine 1.5 times. And this is a transient increase. So that means it goes up and goes down pretty quickly. Then, so chocolate is 1.5 times, sex 2 times, nicotine 2.5 times. And that was by smoking. Nicotine increases your dopamine levels 2.5 times, cocaine 2.5 times, and then amphetamines 10 times baseline. So, and that's important to understand because you kind of it makes you understand why we do the things we do, why people get addicted to things like smoking or cocaine or amphetamines. It's because it raises your level of dopamine and makes you want to pursue that feeling more. Okay. And that's how people get addicted to things. And that just goes to show you that when you think of addiction and you think of people that are doing those types of drugs or habits, you're like, okay, I don't understand why people get addicted. It's because it raises the baseline levels of dopamine so high that we get motivated to want to have that feeling and want to do that more. Two things that I wanted to briefly touch on that increase your levels of dopamine as well. And we talked about, 5 things that can do it over time, but exercise raises your level of dopamine by 2 times. And it depends on how much the person enjoys the exercise. If the person doesn't enjoy the exercise, their baseline levels of dopamine will either not raise or raise just a little bit. But if the person enjoys the exercise, then that person's baseline levels of dopamine can increase by 2 times. And I'll give you an example. Gary Vee actually said he hates running on the treadmill for even 20 minutes, but he can play 4 hours of basketball. Myself, I feel the same way when it comes to either playing flag football or playing rugby. I can go out and play 1 or 2 or 3 hours of something like of rugby or flag football, but I'm not the biggest fan of just going and running on a treadmill. It doesn't excite me to go run on a treadmill, but playing with others, doing fun things like that actually is very exciting to me. And it's kind of one of those things, you need to find things that you really enjoy so that you can continue to do those things, because you're going to be motivated to go do those things. Later in a little bit, we're going to talk about why it's important to enjoy doing hard things, as in be motivated that when it is hard, you get excited about it being a tough thing to do, because that is really the cornerstone of staying motivated and understanding that whenever you want to do something that is very difficult, it's going to be tough and you're enjoying to do tough things. So the other thing that increases dopamine levels pretty high is cold exposure. So cold water therapy, either taking cold showers or doing cold water immersion, they said that levels of dopamine rose 2 points after a person. This is in an experiment where they stayed in cold water for up to an hour and they had supervision. So that was definitely something that you need to take into account. But cold exposure actually increases your levels of dopamine after you get out of the cold, and it also increases your level of adrenaline. So just something to be aware of. If it's something where you're like, man, I don't have the time to exercise, a bunch, but I can maybe do a cold shower in the morning, which is going to get my dopamine levels a little higher and my adrenaline a little higher. And then I can do a 15-minute workout in the afternoon, and that's going to increase your levels of dopamine as well from the exercise. So finding ways to throughout the day increase your levels of dopamine is very, very advantageous. All right. Now, I just want to touch on there's a couple more things that I want to touch on, and it's what Andrew Huberman talked about, that layering on too many dopaminergic activities can really prevent you from actually just wanting to do hard things. All right. So he was saying that you want to watch out. You don't want to say oh, I'm going to listen to my book while I'm running or walking, and that's the only reason I'm walking. No, you want to be able to go, I know that going for a run is really tough, and I'm going to do it because it is tough. And really embracing that mindset of, because this is tough, I know it's going to be worth it, or I know it's going to be something that I need to do. And he uses the example of David Goggins. And David Goggins is a pretty crazy dude, and will basically say if there's something he doesn't want to do, he runs towards it. He actually says, you know what? I don't want to go for a run. I'm going to go for a run. I don't want to write this paper. I'm going to write this paper. I don't want to sit down with this person and have this talk. I'm going to sit down and have this talk, because doing the things you don't want to do and saying enjoy doing things that I don't want to do and that are tough are going to make it give you more motivation to want to continue to do those things. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to get into before we talk about the different videos you can go watch, Andrew Huberman has a discussion with Anna Lembke, who is a very, very smart doctor at Stanford, and she works with a lot of people who have addictions. She actually wrote a book called Dopamine, which is an incredible book about how we can get addicted and why dopamine plays an important role in that, but also why dopamine is very important for us to stay motivated. So she says that there are adaptive ways to increase dopamine and there are non-adaptive ways to increase dopamine. We talked about the adaptive ways to increase your dopamine. Those 5 things: sleep, NSDR, nutrition, exercise, and then I forgot the 5th one, but here nor there. And she says there are non-adaptive ways to increase your dopamine, and that the non-adaptive ways would be like smoking, watching porn, doing drugs. Those types of things are basically non-adaptive. All right, you do those things, they give you a dopamine hit, and then you come back down. She says and she talks about kids these days are really trying to find their passion. And she says that kids need to stop looking for their passion and instead look around where they are, right where you are. Look around right where you are, stop distracting yourself, and look right where you are and see what needs to be done. And she says this because in today's world, a lot of people are basically saying that you should find what you're passionate about so that you love what you do, so that you want to do the thing that you want to do all the time. But when you talk to younger adults or kids, it honestly puts a lot of pressure on them to feel like I have to find the thing that I love to do, and I have to find my passion when I'm 15 to 25, because this is what the people are telling me. People are telling me that I need to find my passion so that I can love what I do, which is not a bad message. But when kids hear this, they get some kids get so wrapped around finding their passion that they don't do things in order to find their passion. And it takes time and effort and trying different things to find your passion. And so that's why I love the message here from Anna Lembke, is to say, find things in your area to do, like take out the trash, become part of a club at your school, or, ask your parents what they need to be done around the house in order to make it better, or do a job within your community so that you can understand like what you like and what you don't like and help the community. She knows that she's talked to a lot of kids and a lot of adults that are very anxious about finding their passion. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that you just have to try different things in order to find what your real passion is. So you have to make that movement and you have to make moves. Sean Puri from My First Million podcast said that he got a talk from his dad one time that really helped him kind of synthesize this information. And his dad says it's about motion, not direction. And what did he mean by that? It means that we actually have to take action and we have to just do something in the area that we want to do it. Like, you're not going to have a perfect vector on what exactly you need to do. You're not going to have that perfect line that points you exactly what you need to do right when you start off. You're going to just need to move the body, create more dopamine, create more motivation that allows you to want to figure out what you want to do. All right. So if we just stay sedentary, if we just sit on our butts and we don't move and we don't do things that we need to try to find our passion, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to be a bolt of lightning that's going to hit us. You actually have to move and understand that you're going to have a lot of trial and error to understand what you're really good at and to stay motivated. So that goes back to health and wellness, where just doing a 15-minute HIIT workout is great to start producing more dopamine that's going to keep you motivated. You don't know the perfect 15-minute HIIT workout that's going to keep you motivated. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that there's not this perfect exercise plan or diet that's always going to put you on the direct line to make you lose the amount of weight that you want to lose or run the fastest marathon time that you want to run. You just have to start. You have to start exercising, doing something. You have to start trying to eat good food. And then over time, you will learn more about what that is. Now, having a plan does help, but that doesn't have to be a perfect plan. It can be a well thought out plan that you think, okay, I think this is going to get me closer to where I want to be with my goals. And I know it's going to be tough. And so I'm going to be glad that it's tough, because I want to do tough things to get me where I want to be. And the focus is, I want to do tough things because doing the tough things will allow you, or enjoying doing tough things will allow you to want to do more tough things and to stay more motivated. So that's it, guys. Hopefully that's helpful. Dopamine is one hell of a molecule, and it drives us to do all of the fun things that we want to do and to overcome a lot of adversity and to fight through a lot of pain and have resilience and all these things. And hopefully this video kind of gave you some good action items to go and do. But I highly recommend going to listen to a lot of the videos that Andrew Huberman has put out, that Anna Lembke did a podcast with Andrew Huberman. And I think to be honest, I have to give a shout out to Andrew Huberman for putting me on the path to try to understand dopamine, because before, 2021, I really didn't know what dopamine was. And so for the past 5 years, I've been really trying to understand myself, the molecules in my body, and trying to understand how I can make myself better. So that's it, guys. Hopefully that helped. I know that was a long podcast, but if you're still here, I appreciate you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. All right, guys, get after it.